Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take that huge stack of sources, all the research, the articles, the expert notes, and we distill it all down. We find those critical nuggets of knowledge you need to get up to speed fast. So today we're stepping away from the usual narratives of European history. We're heading straight into the Crusades, specifically the political theater of the Crusades. Our focus is a deep dive into excerpts from a really significant historical work by Dr. Jamal El-Zunki. It's called The Ruling of Women in the Kingdom of the Lord. And this isn't your typical battle-by-battle account. No, this is a look at forgotten female power, at ruthless political drama, and the dynastic struggles that really defined the Latin East in the 12th century.
That's a perfect way to put it. And Dr. El-Zunki is our guide here. I mean, he's a deeply respected academic. His specialty is the history of the Crusades. And he really zeroes in on that incredibly turbulent period after Latin Europe's initial invasion of the Islamic East. But the sources, they immediately point to something unusual about his work.
Right.
His mission isn't just to do the academic research. It's to take that dense, scholarly study and translate it, turn it into a compelling novel.
Okay, let's unpack this, because El-Zunki is a serious academic. He has a PhD in history from the University of St. Andrews, taught at Kuwait University. Now he's at the Kuwait International Law College. So why? Why would a historian with that kind of pedigree choose to write a novel? I mean, what's he trying to solve with fiction?
It's a really interesting methodological choice.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to necessity, really, not a lack of rigor. He just understands a fundamental truth.
Which is?
Few people, outside of university setting are going to genuinely enjoy slogging through a pure academic study.
That's fair.
So the novel format, it does two things. First, it's about accessibility. It just makes this critical history readable for more people. And second, and this is maybe the more important part, he uses it as a tool for objectivity.
Objectivity through fiction.
Yeah.
That sounds like a contradiction.
It does, but look at how he frames it. He wants to condense decades of really complex events, but he also wants to maintain historical fidelity. So he adopts this approach that's part novel, part play, and he narrates the whole thing entirely through the voices of the Crusader characters themselves.
Ah, I see. So you're hearing from the Baldwins, from Melisande, directly.
Exactly. He's letting the historical sources speak through the characters. It's his way of trying to avoid, imposing a modern external interpretation onto what happened.
So it's not diluting history. It's actually an attempt to present it with more immediacy, with less of a scholarly filter.
Precisely. And the subject he chose for this approach is the successful rule of women in the Latin East.
And this is where things get a little provocative.
Yes. This is where El-Zunki makes his central claim. He argues that this specific topic, female political power, has been actively ignored by Latin or Western historians. He even suggests, and this is his phrase, that the omission might be to not open the eyes of readers to the black life of Latin women.
Okay, that is an incredibly loaded claim. And just to be clear for everyone listening, we're reporting on his claim impartially here. When he uses a phrase like the black life of Latin women, what is he actually getting at? What's the context?
Right. It's really important to see this through the lens of 12th century history. He isn't saying Latin women were evil or anything like that. He's pointing to a contrast. The contrast between the idealized, very restrictive view of womanhood back in Western Europe.
And the reality on the ground in the Crusader states.
Exactly. Women like Queen Melisande, they had real, tangible political power, economic power, agency in their marriages. Things that were often just not available to their counterparts back in France or England.
So the black life he's referring to is, what, the messiness, the ruthlessness?
The ruthlessness, the moral ambiguity, the open political maneuver, all of it. The parts that don't fit into a clean, chivalrous, male-dominated image of the Crusades.
So he's suggesting a kind of cultural editing, that historians decided this particular narrative just didn't fit the brand, so to speak, so it got buried?
That seems to be his argument. And it does raise that important question about who controls what parts of history we focus on.
Okay, so let's rewind. Let's see where this narrative actually begins in his work. Where does he set the stage?
He starts right at the very beginning. We're in 1095. The novel opens with a dialogue between Lord Baldwin of Boulogne and his cousin, Lord Baldwin of Berg.
So the key players from day one.
The key players. They're on their way to the Council of Clermont in southern France, which is, of course, the exact moment Pope Urban II launches the entire Crusade movement, the war against the Muslims.
And we need to keep our Baldwin straight here. So Baldwin of Boulogne.
He becomes the very first king of Jerusalem.
Got it. And his cousin, Baldwin of Berg.
He becomes the second king, And Alzanki presents him as the main character, the viewpoint for the novel.
Mhm.
It immediately sets up this deep, familial, personal dynamic at the heart of this new kingdom.
And the sources paint Berg as incredibly ambitious. He didn't just want Jerusalem.
No, his ambition was huge. The plan was to dominate all the Latin countries that were being established in the East.
And his marriage was a key part of the story too,
A
right?
crucial part, he married an Armenian woman, Morphia. And that's important because it just further shows the cross-cultural complexity of the Latin East. Alliances, even royalty, were often a hybrid of East and West.
But the real dynastic drama, the story Alzanki really wants to tell that kicks off with their daughter.
Yes, with Melisande, the entire focus of the book pivots to her.
So the groundwork is laid by these powerful men, but the central historical argument he's making really rests on the next generation. It rests on Queen Melisande.
Exactly. And what's so unique about Melisande is how she came to power. She didn't just, gain influence by marrying a king.
Her father did something pretty radical for the time.
He did. Baldwin II crowned her before his death in 1030 as a co-ruler. Not a regent, a co-ruler.
So she was legitimate alongside her husband, Fulk, and her infant son, who was Baldwin III.
Correct. Which meant she held intrinsic independent political authority from the very start. And that was, it was almost unheard of for a woman in Western Europe at the time.
So her father establishes her as a sovereign in her own right, not just a consort waiting for a male heir to grow up. But the moment he died, the sources say that power-sharing arrangement just fell apart.
It collapsed almost immediately. It turned into this intense rivalry between Queen Melisande and her own husband, King Fulk. They were in a constant battle for who had ultimate control.
Not exactly a picture of stable governance.
Not at all. This internal strife destabilized the monarchy from day one. It just shows you how fragile that whole political system really was.
What's fascinating here, though, is what happens next. The emergence of actual independent female rule.
It took nearly a decade. But after King Fulk died in 1142, Melisande finally stepped into that role fully. She began ruling the Kingdom of Jerusalem completely independently.
She seized the opportunity.
She absolutely did. Her son, Baldwin III, he was only 13 at the time. A child, politically speaking. So Melisande saw this as her moment to govern freely, to consolidate her own power base with allies in the church, with the nobility.
And she was good at it.
She showed remarkable political skill during this period of sole rule.
But the conflict didn't end with her husband's death, did it? The sources say it just shifted. It shifted to her son.
And that's where it gets really interesting. This is where Alzanki uncovers that core political ruthlessness.
She wasn't ready to give up power.
Not at all. She became fiercely protective of it. When her son, King Baldwin III, came of age, when he officially turned 21, Melisande was not willing to step aside.
And this wasn't just a mother, trying to delay the handover. The sources suggest something much darker, a political maneuver. She apparently tried to engage him in bad behavior. What is the evidence for that? I mean, that's an astonishing claim of sabotage.
Alzanki frames it as a desperate but calculated political tactic. The implication is that she fostered a climate of dissipation around him, moral laxity.
Why? To what end?
To erode his image, his legitimacy, his political will right in front of the court and the population. If the young king could be painted as irresponsible or morally compromised.
She could argue that the kingdom still needed her steady, experienced hand at the tiller.
Exactly. It shows you the high stakes of just holding on to power in the Latin East. This was less about maternal affection and much more about pure political survival.
It really cuts against that heroic narrative of the Crusader states, doesn't it? It shows that the most dangerous enemies were often inside the palace walls.
Absolutely. And this conflict, it escalated. It forced the kingdom into a political crisis, which all came to a head in 1151.
And in the end?
In the end, King Baldwin III was successful. He managed to get enough support from the nobility to strip his mother of her independent legitimacy.
He took back power.
He took back full control of all royal powers and effectively moved her out of active politics for good.
So to summarize this whole arc for you listening, Alzanki's work really showcases the messy political reality of the Latin East. It's defined by these complex family rivalries and centrally a struggle for political agency by women figures like Melisande that he argues was intentionally obscured by Western historians.
And if you connect that back to the bigger picture, this whole deep dive really validates his method. By choosing the novel,
Yeah.
By focusing on these crusader voices, he's managed to resurrect these documented instances of female political power.
It shows how crucial it is to look beyond the mainstream
To
narrative.
find the full truth, yes.
And it seems he's not done with this period. We learned he has more work planned.
That's right. He's planning to publish a purely academic study next called Yagician of Antioch and the First Crusade.
A more traditional approach.
For that one, yes. But then he intends to return to his accessible format with another historical novel, narrated by a single character this time. He's really committed to bridging that gap between the university and the public.
So we've seen how one historian used a novel to bring history to life, centering it on a figure like Queen Melisande. I think the lesson here is pretty profound. History isn't just about what sources exist.
No, it's about which perspectives are chosen to be brought to the forefront.
Precisely.
Which brings us to the final thought to leave you with. Consider the implications of Alzonki's claim that Western historians overlook this topic to avoid discussing what he calls the black life of Latin women. What this suggests is that history, even when it's based strictly on verifiable facts, is always an edited narrative. It's always filtered through the cultural and political lens of the era in which it's written.
So the question becomes,
Yet other significant historical figures, or what other political dramas, might still be waiting out there to be uncovered. Not because the documents are missing, but simply because the dominant historical voices chose not to look for them. Or maybe chose not to see them. That's the real historical bias we should all keep challenging.